Hello and welcome back to the channel where it's time for the 10th and final game in my Dreamcast First Impressions series, with today's game being a racing game known as 4-Wheel Thunder, which saw release in North America in May of 2000 and then was followed up by a PAL release in June of the same year. It did not get a release in Japan. It is a sequel of sorts as well to Hydro Thunder that had been released previously on the Dreamcast as well as the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation. So if you aren't aware, 4-Wheel Thunder is an off-road style racing game where you take control of a variety of buggies, jeeps and other off-road vehicles. In fact, it does bear a little bit of a resemblance to that game known as Hardcore 4x4 that I've obviously spoken about on the channel previously. Like always, we'll be talking about what 4-Wheel Thunder looks like, what it sounds like, what it plays like, how much content and lifespan I think it's got, and ultimately whether it's a game I'm going to play more of in the future before we award it a final grade based on its first impressions. So once you hit the main menu, you'll see you've got a choice of 1-player, 2-player, options and Hall of Fame, where you can check all the high scores. Once you head into options, you've got a few sound settings that you can change. You can check the control pad layout, and you can also load and save your data. Once you head into the vehicle selection screen on your mode of play, you'll see there's 8 vehicles to start with, all strikingly different in terms of visuals and performance, and you've got a handful of courses available at the start of the game as well. So like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and as soon as you've loaded up your first race, you'll probably be thinking exactly what I thought, and that this is a very good looking racing game for the Dreamcast. I couldn't believe the level of clarity and sharpness in the visuals. The performance of the game was basically flawless in my opinion. I didn't notice any pop-up at all. The game is simply a fantastic performing and looking Dreamcast game. It's not got perhaps the highest levels of trackside detail, certainly for the outdoor track that I've noticed anyway. Take into account I've only played through about half of the races in the game, but it's very difficult to put any flaws against this game. All the vehicles look fantastic. They've got really good levels of detail, and the menu presentation of this game is absolutely fantastic. I think it's got really, really strong visual appeal throughout the whole entire game. Now moving on to the sound effects and music, and what I personally felt here is that the sound and the music within the game was the complete polar opposite of the visuals, because the visual performance and appeal of the game I felt was fantastic. What we get in the sound department is the complete opposite, because we've just got completely generic, mundane tracks that I don't find interesting at all. They're not terrible, but they just don't add anything to the experience whatsoever. But the music's irrelevant really, because you'll realize the sound is dominated by the sound of you using your nitro boost practically every second that you've got it available, and it becomes very, very repetitive. And to worsen it, once you start to run out and you're using your boost, you get this timer beeping in the background. It's frustrating. It really, really is. And these two sound effects actually dominate the game in terms of its overall sound and music. It doesn't matter what the music tracks are really, because these sound effects just completely dominate the game. But regardless of that, I will give you some samples of the music so you can decide for yourselves whether you think they're just as generic and mundane as I do. So moving on to the gameplay next, and in terms of the way Four Wheel Thunder controls and plays, it's actually pretty decent. It's quite easy to learn the way it plays because it's simply a case of accelerate, brake, and then using your nitro boosts as much as you possibly can. All of the vehicles that I've controlled handle really well, and they're suitably different dependent on their attributes, which is nice. This area of the game and just the general way it plays is actually a massive plus point. I actually think it's quite fun just to play and race through the tracks, but I feel there are a couple of issues. First of all, the fact that you're over relying on nitro boosts in every single race to try and have a level of success. If you don't bother collecting any, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to place first in any of the races, because you simply do need to collect them constantly and be activating them over and over again, and this does get a little bit repetitive. Of course, the second thing is remembering where all the possible shortcuts are on the tracks. Again, without doing these, you're not going to have much success in the game, and the game actually is quite challenging. The computer's pretty aggressive in the way that they are constantly taking all of the shortcuts and trying to win every single race and make it very, very difficult for you. It's not a case of just pick up, race, and you will win. It's the kind of game that is going to need actually a fair bit of practice putting into it so that you learn how to win every race. And for me, this isn't the style of racing game that I want to invest a lot of time into practice. For me, this kind of racing game is the kind, I should say, where I want to pick up, play it, and enjoy it straight away and have a reasonable amount of success. There aren't any difficulty settings either within the game. You can't pick easy, normal, or hard. It's just simply one difficulty, and you've got to get used to it straight away. And it's actually quite a challenge in all fairness. And one thing that I read about the game, certainly that I actually agree with, to be fair, is the fact that based on the fact that it's relatively difficult, it might be the kind of game that somebody would only want to rent at the time it came out, and only real hardcore racing fans would want to buy it and play it because of actually the challenge that it presents. And I actually agree with this statement. So moving on to content and lifespan, and in terms of a one-player experience, we've got practice, arcade indoor, arcade outdoor, and championship, and you'll need to progress through the one-player modes to get access to the other tracks and the other vehicles in the game. There are 24 core tracks within the game and just over 60 vehicles as well. You can upgrade those vehicles in championship mode too by collecting money and spending it on the vehicle. So I do feel there's a substantial one-player experience here, much more than we'd seen previously in the other Thunder game, Hydro Thunder. There's also two-player options as well, a few different things that you can play through here. I didn't actually sample any of the two-player game for my video though, but I can imagine it would run pretty good because this game runs absolutely flawlessly as a one-player game. So I do feel it's probably quite a decent two-player game. In terms of content and lifespan overall, I actually think there is quite a lot here. It's just really a question of whether you're going to persist with getting better and better and mastering all of the shortcuts within the races to gain that level of success that you need to unlock everything within the game. So like always, that leaves us with our two final questions. Is Four Wheel Thunder a game I'm going to come back to and play more of in the future? And what final grade am I going to give it? In terms of whether I'm going to play it again, I'm kind of on the fence at the moment because I like the way it looks. I think it's got really good visual quality, and I like the way it plays. I just don't like the fact that I feel like it's the kind of racer that I'm going to have to put in a fair bit of time to master all of the courses. This is the kind of racing game that I want to pick up and play and have a reasonable amount of success straight away. Very similar to Colin McRae Dirt 2 that I took a look at on the Wii quite a while back. So at the moment, I'm unsure. Now, in terms of a final grade, based on its first impressions, this is definitely better than Hydro Thunder, the other Thunder game that we looked at on the Dreamcast. It's got more tracks, it's got more cars, it's got a better one-player experience. So I'm going to give Four Wheel Thunder a C+. Now, this would have been a higher grade in my opinion if the sound and music was just better and the sound effects weren't so repetitive. I think this does bring it down a bit in my opinion. So a C+ is the final grade that Four Wheel Thunder gets. So with this being the 10th episode in the series, it is of course bringing us to the conclusion of the Dreamcast First Impressions series. Certainly, at least for now, we may well revisit this console again in the future. At the moment, you can see all of those 10 games on the screen in descending order from best to worst, with what they got as their first impressions grade. Without a doubt, Headhunter, Metropolis Street Racer and House of the Dead 2 were the standout titles for me, with a few games performing pretty lacklusterly in the form of Shadow Man, Tomb Raider 4 and without a doubt Soul Fighter, definitely the worst game that I took a look at in the series. But of course, these opinions and these first impression grades are just my own thoughts and what I thought based on the first hour and a half of these games. Of course, I'm always interested in hearing all of your thoughts on any of the games that I've covered down below, so do let me know what they are. And like always, I will be back in the near future with another new series of First Impressions videos. Goodbye for now.